I'm a stereotype. Cigarette out.
Thank you, sir.
Good vibrations.
Good vibrations. Conducive atmosphere.
Tikai.
You're traveling, take it easy, take the train.
It's kind of slippery.
I'll be careful. Besides, we're not alone.
Ah, yes.
We've got the blimp behind us.
Goodyear Research engineered an all-season radio to provide reliable traction summer and winter. Traction the sisters can have faith in.
So, with the blimp behind us, our car handles
Just divinely.
Traction. One more reason Goodyear is out front, worldwide.
Oh, it's good to have friends in high places.
Coming up next, Webster.
Good morning. As if things in Canada weren't complicated enough, with constitutional disaster perhaps facing us, with economic disaster not very far round the corner, say some, with the renewed prospect of Quebec's separatism, what do we find now? We find there's a group in Vancouver of Sikhs who are allegedly plotting some separatist plan for the state of the Punjab to be called Khalistan from bases in Canada, including Vancouver. And to try and explain that to us this morning, if he can, as a sympathizer, is Mohinder Paul Singh, who is a priest in the Sikh temple. Precisely what he's got to do with this separatism, we'll find out later. Also on the program this morning, I have three feminists of different hue, I may suspect. First one you've met before in this program, the inimitable Margaret Atwood. Margaret has written a new book, of course. I wouldn't dare say she was doing a Pierre Berton or she'd hit me. A new book called Bodily Harm. You'll meet Margaret. Next on the program this morning, we've got a woman who used to write for Ms., the magazine, who is a feminist, and who's going to tell us, her name is Letty Pogrebin. Get the name right, Pogrebin. Once heard, you'll never forget it. Pogrebin is the author of a book which is the antithesis of all I ever learned. It's called Growing Up Free. And then we've got advice for the live-in couples, the common laws. And don't you dare say that anybody living common law is living in sin. That's totally outre, gone, down the drain. Lynn Fels, unmarried couples in Canada. I believe there are still a couple of married couples left somewhere. But we're going to start the program this morning with Mohinder Paul Singh after the break. We in the news business tend, of course, for simplicity's sake, to sensationalize things. Now, Mohinder Paul Singh is in some way connected with its plan to use Canada as a base to achieve separatism for the Punjab. True or false?
I don't think so. The real point is, Sikhs everywhere around the globe, wherever they are sympathizers to their brethren who are launching a struggle in India, specifically in Punjab, a state in northern India, which is the homeland. The struggle is for just to seek for their identity, their separate existence within Indian Union. The problem is there.
As I understand it, after the British left in the middle 40s,
Yeah.
there was a plan that Punjab would have self-determination.
Yeah.
And between them, between Pakistan and India,
Yes.
Punjab was denied self-determination.
The picture contrary to it. On that fateful night, 15 August 1947, when British authorities, especially out Mountbatten, they were just going to transact political power to Indian leaders.
Right?
At that moment, 3 communities or different nations living on Indian subcontinent, they were considered legitimate heirs to Indian political power.
Legitimate heirs.
Heirs.
The 3 communities.
Yeah, 3
Pakistan, Punjab, and India.
In more simpler terms, Hindus, Mohammedans, and the Sikhs.
The Sikhs.
The Sikhs. They were considered partners and heir to Indian political power, soon going to be handed over to Indian leaders. Around August 1947. What happened actually? Hindus led by Mahatma Gandhi and first Prime Minister of independent India, Pandit Nehru, and a Hindu fanatic, I say, Mr. Patel, he was Home Minister.
Right?
And Mohammedan led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and the Sikhs were guided by Master Tara Singh.
But you're losing me here. You're losing me. Is it not a fact that after that kerfuffle, after all the slaughter, you were left with two nations on the
I want to
subcontinent?
say how it happened. Those 3 here, they were to be treated as equal brothers by the outgoing British authorities.
But they weren't.
They weren't. Why they weren't? The nucleus, root cause of the problem goes to that event. I'm going to elaborate.
No, not forever you're not going to elaborate. The root cause of the problem now is that the Sikhs did not get self-determination.
Why didn't they get? Why didn't Hindu leaders entrapped Sikh leaders to side with them to accelerate the freedom process?
But the fact remains that now we have a situation whereby many Sikhs throughout the world
Yeah.
want to see what they
Yes.
thought there was that promise now kept.
Yes,
They want to see the Punjab become the state of Khalistan.
yes.
What I want to know from you is, how can you involve Canada in this fight? How can anybody set up a so-called consulate for the Republic of Khalistan when India is a diplomatic friend of Canada
A Commonwealth member too.
and Commonwealth?
Yeah, yeah.
And we have friendly relations with India. And here are these people who want the state of Khalistan doing their best to rupture relations between Canada and India.
Maybe, I don't agree with it. Actually, what's going on in Punjab now, the fight among the brothers there, younger brother, junior brother, Sikh nation, Sikh community, they are fighting for justice, which they were denied by the Indian leaders. On their solemn pledge, they put their lot with Indian leaders. Then they changed their face. It's on history, it's on record. What's happening in Punjab now? Main political spokesman of the Sikhs, that's Akali Dal. Therefore, Sikh are a separate nation. And few extremist people among the Sikh community, they are launching much more extremist movement that a separate state for the Sikhs.
I understand. Now, are you one of the extremists?
Maybe in between.
Tell me, are you a Canadian citizen living in this country?
No, I'm just a visitor and missionary.
Are you a legal visitor to
No,
this country?
legal visitor.
You are a legal
Visitor.
Do you plan to stay?
If circumstances permit me.
Are you upset by the fact that the Canadian government, under pressure from the Indian government,
Yeah,
has said, hey, no more visitors without visa. Too many are claiming refugee status.
The situation
Does
is...
that upset you?
It upsets me. I am in hot waters. But I fail to understand what prompted Honorable Immigration Minister to apply his acts particularly on the Sikhs and Indians. The situation in Punjab, I feel no doubt quite troubled. But yet it hasn't touched flashpoint. Dialogue going on between Indian leaders and Sikh leaders to bring about some settlement between the main political spokesman of the Sikhs, which Akalis are.
But you see, Mohinder, I'm looking at this from a Canadian political point of view.
Yeah.
And if I may give you some of our background, we have had two major amnesties in the past. In the 50s, we found it necessary to have an amnesty for 12,000 illegal entrants to the country from mainland China.
Yeah.
In the 70s, we found it necessary to have a major amnesty for Vietnam deserters and many other people who came into the country on that basis.
Yeah.
Obviously, and we then changed our immigration law. We then said, okay, to become an immigrant to Canada, you must get your visa as an immigrant from outside. Obviously under
It is
pressure.
applicable with Vietnamese too?
No. We gave them an amnesty.
In past.
Since then, we have changed the law and said to become an immigrant to Canada, for the sake of control and order, you must apply from outside. So when all these Sikhs began to apply for refugee status, the government, on the behest of the Indian government, I'm sure,
It's there.
said, stop it. Not unreasonable.
Maybe.
Not
Reasonable,
unreasonable.
partly reasonable, partly reasonable.
Why should Canada allow any group to build itself up on what could be illegal immigrants to plot separatism in India from Canada? Why should they?
It is not separatism in that sense as Indian authorities might look at. The situation is Sikhs fighting a battle, launching a movement for a justifiable, a just cause, a just establishment of their entity in India, on Indian subcontinent.
Don't argue.
And people outside Punjab, outside India, out of sympathy, being member of same community, it's their natural right to sympathize with them or not.
Just a minute. Right now, your consuls for Khalistan are issuing so-called passports, so-called currency, setting up the appearance of a separate state here. We can't tolerate this, can we?
Because the situation is when some movement is launched, it has to be launched for so many corners.
So you're going to launch it?
It's a strategy,
So
baby.
you're going to launch it here? You're going to launch it
I
here?
am not in picture. I am not well acquainted with what the developments are going on.
We'll do another short segment with you to clean up a few points which still baffle me with Mohinder Paul Singh, who's a visitor priest from the Punjab.
Punjab.
You might be in
But I am
trouble,
well acquainted with the situation there, what's going on in Punjab.
but you could be in trouble when you go home
I suspect.
after the break. Let me concede, if only for the sake of clarity, to Mohinder Paul Singh, who's a visiting priest from India. We'll concede that you have a cause for a separate Punjab called Khalistan. Let me concede that.
Yeah.
Because your complicated story of the history will be lost on me and my viewers.
Yes, but I'm enforced to.
No,
I have my
but-
limitations.
No, you have no limitations.
When I have to just give my views on the present situation, I must look back, in the backdrop.
I know, but best if I ask you simple questions. Do you approve of military training for dissident Sikhs in Canada to fight a battle in India?
It again goes to the past.
Yes or no?
Because militant resistance and militant means to achieve justice are part and parcel of Sikh doctrine,
You mean you fight?
elaborated by 10th Master.
You
He
are a
said,
warlike race.
we are militant. I think Sikh is the best soldier of the world, as the history goes.
The British would tell you the same thing. The Sikhs
Same.
were their best soldiers. And the Gurkhas. And the
a
Gurkhas.
Sikh naturally militant.
But just
by
a
birth
moment.
he is fighter.
Are you entitled to do that kind of preparation for fighting from a country of Canada, which has peaceful relations with India?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
You approve of it? Yes. Tell me yes.
Not exactly, no comments at the moment.
Oh, no comment.
No comments.
Just a glint in your eye. A warlike Sikh
What I see.
glint in your eye, but no comment.
I just hope for the best in future. Circumstances take their own turn.
But would you not expect the Canadian authorities, pushed by the Indian diplomats, to crack down on your so-called consulate general and close it? Would you not expect that?
We could expect.
Do you think they will do
Government could
that?
government could too.
How many Sikhs are there in Canada? 60,000?
about 60,000 in lower mainland. No, in all of
In
Canada,
lower
more than
mainland?
1 lakh, more than 1/10 million. In whole of Canada.
A lakh.
More than a lakh, 1/10 million, more than.
100,000.
100,000.
Yeah.
A lakh in Indian term.
A lakh.
Yeah.
A lakh of rupees.
Lakh of rupees.
Okay, 100,000. Are they all militant? No.
No.
How
Militant
many have
is-
become Canadianized? How many have become eaten away by the soft life in Canada?
Soft life in Canada has got its own impact on Sikh people here.
Because I know Sikhs who do not wear the turban.
I know. I know. I'm aware of their complications, their limitations too. They are Sikh by faith, by profession, but sometimes their observances, formalities, and their costumes, regulations, they feel a bit hard in these present circumstances, particularly in Western lifestyle.
All right, of the 60,000 Sikhs in British Columbia, how many of them support your warlike stance?
Sentimentally, all the Sikhs supporting us.
Really supporting?
Sentimentally, the word sentimentally.
All of them
Maybe
support
not
you.
actively supporting us.
How many actively support you?
I don't have the figure at the moment.
Enough to fill the Sikh temple?
Enough, more than enough, I think.
More than enough to fill
Whenever there's some cause, for justice, it's a right cause, noble cause it is. Because Khalsa shall rule is the slogan, as a holy song reverberating throughout the history. And no
Khalsa
Sikh can
Daiva.
deny, Khalsa shall rule. Khalsa, an individual, group of individuals who are destined to rule in the name of God. They will administer justice for the welfare of mankind as a whole.
Mohinder Paul Singh, I fully accept without argument your faith, the premises of your faith, right? I wish I had the same kind of faith. I'm merely saying that don't you feel a little bit arrogant in adopting this attitude in Canada, where we don't want any trouble
we are not
with
getting
India?
arrogant. Sikhs in Canada, they are law-abiding people, peaceful community, doing no mischief, creating no fuss, no problem for authorities.
Not if they start military training to go fight in the Punjab.
It's not specifically in Canada too. Sikhs, wherever they are preparing to face the hardships,
Of
to
a
achieve
war.
their destiny.
Of a war.
War may be, militant resistance may be last resort.
All right.
Last weapon.
I've done my best.
Not at the moment,
I've
I
done
think.
my best. You're a very good spokesman for the Sikh faith. But tell
Thanks
me,
for your kind compliments.
are you the secret courier who brought out messages from the Punjab for Jagmeet Singh?
Sikh courier,
Secret-
I am not
You're not.
aware of.
Have you
no,
applied for
not.
political refugee?
Mine allegiance to Chief Khalsa Diwan, a historical organization of the Sikhs, who stand for separate, full-fledged, independent entity of Sikh nation, and we are fighting for it.
I can
My
understand.
allegiance to that organization.
Well, let me ask you this question in closing. Are you going to fight for it in Canada or in India?
Wherever my community, my nation needs me to pull my string.
Have
to
you
pull my-
applied for status as a political refugee in Canada?
Not yet.
Will you?
I can expect. I am not certain about it at the moment.
You may do.
I may go back.
And apply for landed immigrant status to come here.
I can't say. I can't say. I may be needed much more in my own homeland to assist my brethren who are already in the war front.
Mohinder, you've shed some light on this for me, and I'm grateful for your presence here
Thank
this
you.
morning.
Thanks a lot.
Mohinder Paul Singh, visiting priest at the Sikh temple. Thank you,
Thanks a
Mohinder.
lot. Thank you very much.
Next, Margaret Atwood. The Grand Dame, I hope she doesn't wince when I say that. Not the Grand Dame. Yes, the Grand Dame of Canadian literature. After the break. First time I met Margaret Atwood, and I suspect she felt the same about me, we were absolutely terrified of each other. Were we not? Eh? Were we not?
You spent the whole time attacking Peter Newman.
On the last interview.
Yes, I'm glad it wasn't me.
Was he on the same show?
No, but he'd said that I had ice cold blue eyes and corrugated hair, and you didn't think that was appropriate.
Oh, your hair isn't corrugated, your eyes are blue.
But not cold.
No, they're not cold. They can be quite hard, though, on occasion. But let's get off your eyes. Don't be silly. You've written another book. I made one crack about you this morning that, you're writing so many books and you're on so many bestseller lists that if I were to dare to say that you were the other sexy's Pierre Berton, you'd clout me.
Probably I would, yes. So I'm sure you won't say that.
No, I won't say that. I wouldn't say it at all. Actually, your book, Bodily Harm, is a good book, but it indicates a fairly tough attitude of you towards life and men and living alone and all the rest of it.
I thought I was really very nice to men, considering.
Well, I felt you kind of threw them aside a little bit.
No, I mean,
again.
look at who's the hero of the book. Now, people tend to pass over the hero of the book, partly because he's 60 years old and maybe because he's black and possibly because Rennie isn't having an affair with him.
Right.
But Dr. Minnow, as one reviewer pointed out, is the good man in the book, and we can't point to any good women who have the same position.
Well, I suppose that's a question of, when you're writing a book, of course, one must forget all these ephemeral things about feminism or equality because the plot takes over and writes the book for you, does it not?
Well, I don't think it's quite that way. I think the novelist's job has always been to look at the society around. And I give you Charles Dickens. Now, we may think all those match girls and orphans dying in the snow are quaint, but that's not why they're in Dickens' books. They're in Dickens' books because they really did die in the snow. And I think any novelist who's doing what Dickens and other traditional novelists have done, that is look at the society, can't forget things like inequality and so on because they're right there to be seen.
I suppose Dickens was the reporter and social commentator par excellence who actually caused a fair amount of social revolution in England.
Social change.
It was almost social revolution.
Well, I think cleaning up the drains isn't social revolution.
Well, if you can go back to England 100 years ago or even 80 years ago, conditions there were appalling for human beings as compared to conditions even in Canada 80 or 100 years ago.
But England didn't go to war over it and shoot people. They did clean up the act a lot, and I suppose that's a revolution of a kind, and really the kind of revolution I myself am interested in, but there's revolution and revolution.
Have you got your eyes on any economic revolutions or social changes that you would really like to make in your next book? I can't think of you focusing on this book on a specific piece of social change that you wanted.
Well, okay, it's not the kind of book that says, here is the awful situation and here is what we should do about it. That's not what Dickens did either, incidentally. And novelists have not tended to provide total solutions, except in science fiction. And in science fiction, you don't have to go through the process. You just get to see the finished future society working so beautifully.
Go on.
Right.
I was going to say, talking about Newman, he's done a very slick book I'm going to be talking to him about very shortly on all the new money in the Canadian establishment.
Yes.
And have you read it yet?
No, but its name was going before him because I was in Calgary recently and they were all really waiting for him.
Yeah, I know, because I feel he's done the Peter Pucklingtons and the Nelson Scalbanias and all the easy big money boys who want to talk about the establishment. My complaint about Newman, here I go again, is that he certainly doesn't go for social change, does he? He admires everything. It's wonderful. They made $1 billion.
Yeah, well, back to reality.
Back to reality. Now, back to reality for you. You're still living in Toronto.
I'm living in Toronto, yes.
You still only have one child.
I still only have one child.
Is that the end of your family?
Well, I am 41.
Is that too old?
It's not too old for me, but Graham is 47. Now, I'm not meaning to say they couldn't squeeze a few more out, but...
Really, on behalf of Graham, I must take instant...
No, just a sec. He's got 3 already. He's been doing this since he was 25. And I'm not sure that he could take the late nights.
I'm not sure.
Getting up in the middle of the night.
I have thousands of children and many grandchildren, and I love them dearly, and I hope they're not watching this morning. But last summer, I think it was, we had all 16 of the Websters, all 16 of us, our generation, in one place at one time. And after 3 weeks, I was a fit case for psychiatric treatment.
Now you know what mothers go through.
Oh, no, mothers, of course, are given by God a special maternal instinct, which makes it easy for them to maintain their cool and cool. And after all, I mean, a woman's greatest achievement in life is
I've
to
got a
bear
wonderful
children.
book for you to read. It's just terrific. You know what it is?
No.
Do you remember Dr. Marie Stopes?
Marie Stopes?
Yes. She
Oh,
was the
Marie
woman
Stopes,
who-
the old birth control woman.
That's right. Well, there's a book out now of letters that people wrote to Dr. Marie Stopes from all walks of life. Poor people, middle-class people, clergymen, the works. You would find this absolutely fascinating, and especially the ones from poor people. These women who have 16 children, no money, husband that drinks, and are so desperate to find out from poor Dr. Marie Stopes how to fix it up.
You make me yearn for the years that the locusts have eaten, because I was the pioneer in Vancouver. Nothing to do with actual procreation, but I prevented a fair amount of it.
How did you do that? Self-restraint?
Partially. No, because in these days, you know, when you couldn't get kids adopted, when all the little children up for adoption were slightly crippled, or slightly retarded, or slightly colored and whatnot, and when the married woman with 4 kids would go to her doctor and the doctor would say, no, I used to send women who could raise the money to Japan to fly now and abort later.
Did you really?
Or to London.
A
When they were
pioneer
rejected
feminist.
here. Well, a woman comes to you and she's absolutely desperate and she can't get an abortion in this country, especially if there's a religious thing involved on a fight between the husband and wife, and she's got varicose veins and 4 kids and no money. It's cheaper to borrow from the bank and go have an abortion. And I've lost my childish enthusiasm to fight for women's causes and abortion, because I think you people who want a woman's body to be her own are losing the battle. I think you're losing it.
You mean you're going to change sides because you think one side is losing?
No, I'm just saying that I've kind of lost my pristine excitement because I don't feel there's a great women especially nowadays will not fight for the cause to control their own bodies.
Well, I don't know about that one either. I've
What,
noticed
do
a
you?
certain amount of fighting going on.
Are you in favor of a woman being totally in control of her own body to do with as she wills?
Are you in favor of a man being totally in control of his body to do with as he wills?
Well, I'll answer both questions. Yes
Okay.
and yes.
Yes and yes. There
Yeah.
you go.
So
Yeah.
we're not even in disagreement on the subject?
No, as long as it doesn't involve going to war and killing people.
How the hell did
my
war
point.
and killing people get into this conversation?
Well, that's one thing that men do with their bodies.
That's a non sequitur. Oh,
No, I
women.
don't
Oh,
think-
equals right for women. I mean, after all, women must be allowed to, if they're going to be in combat, they must have the same risks as men.
No. I'm against combat altogether.
You'd rather be red than dead.
I'd rather be a pacifist.
All the way.
Well, don't know about that, but
There's always a qualification.
There's
Am I
always a
time to
cutoff
take a
point.
section of phone calls with Margaret Atwood this morning? You want to take some phone calls?
if they've, I think last time we took phone calls, nobody phoned in. Except one of my relatives who wanted to say hello.
You're determined to put me down this morning
No,
just
I'm
because
not.
you're a
It's
big
not-
shot
it's
author
not
and I've
you,
always
sweetie,
been
it's
nice to
me.
you up to now. Flood these bloody phones after the break. Many times have you traipsed, that's a good word, isn't it?
Trips?
Traipsed.
Oh, traipsed across the country.
Right.
Traipsed. I've traipsed across the country now, I think 3 times. It seems like more, but in fact it's only been 3.
Many shows a day do you do?
In Ottawa, it was, I think, 11 interviews and 1 book signing. That's quite a few. And a reading at night.
If you didn't do it, wouldn't your books sell just as well?
I keep asking Jack McClellan that, and he keeps saying no.
You got to do them.
Well, I hate to see a grown man cry, and especially Jack, who's an old friend of mine.
That's right. And of course, you're very useful to people like me who go through people like a sausage machine. You know, all helps. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. There are a few calls for Margaret. Go ahead to Margaret Atwood in a clear, loud voice and no niceties. Go straight at it.
Oh, they can be nice if they want to.
Oh, can they? Hello?
Yes, you can be nice if you want to.
I'm Gladys. Go ahead, please. Have we got phone problems this morning?
Is that me?
That's you. Go ahead.
I want to say, Margaret Atwood, that I admire you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And I don't say I understand all your books, but I think there's something about you that's fine. I picked up one of your books on poetry one time in a bookstore. I thought, how cruel human beings are. And I hope you keep on writing. And I hope I can understand them more and more.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. There was a call.
Yes,
One
that
call.
was a nice
Quite a
call.
pleasant
Like
call.
that.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
To Miss Atwood, I have very mixed feelings about abortion, and I wonder if women feel they should control their own bodies before they become pregnant.
I think that would be far preferable. And my own feeling about abortion is that it's a lesser evil. I don't think anybody has ever said that abortion is what you want to do for a bit of fun on a Saturday afternoon. I mean, I don't think any woman that I've ever spoken to likes the idea of abortion. But on the other hand, when you go back and read the kinds of situations that people were in when they were absolutely desperate before there was birth control, and birth control is by no means totally known about now or totally widely practiced, you have to conclude that, especially in countries that are very, very overpopulated and very poor, it's really a lesser evil.
I realize that, but I really don't feel we should use birth control, or rather
Use abortion as birth control.
Agreed.
I agree with you as well.
I lost my link with Malcolm Muggeridge, whom I used to think was great showbiz, when he sat in a program with me once and I said to him, you would rather have 20 million children born and die of starvation in the gutters of India than of abortion? He said, yes, it's God's will.
Well, it's not the same God we're talking about in that case.
No, Muggeridge is a different God from thee and me.
Unfortunately, mine is the New Testament one, minus a lot of things that I think were interpolated later.
Mine is the Old Testament one. I think I prefer it. One step wrong and it's hellfire.
Oh,
and
come on,
damnation
underneath that you're not
forevermore.
like that.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Hello. If you say hello again, I'll hit you. Go ahead to Margaret Atwood.
Yes. I want to express my admiration for you to speak out against the war.
Yes?
Armament money would open many daycare centers and help in many ways to make this beautiful country.
Well, that sounds very
Yes.
nice, and we appreciate your thoughts, but she's a little overcome with emotion.
That's all right.
We don't have time for emotion
It's okay
in
to
this
be
program.
overcome with emotion, Jack.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would just like to say that, Margaret Atwood, you've got a lot of great progressive ideas, and I support particularly on the pro-choice issue, and I also support your involvement and your appearances at York University. Now, my question is, how have you been able to combine your being a public figure, a very strong public figure, and at the same time stand up for what you believe?
Well, I don't see that there's necessarily any conflict. Just because you're a public figure doesn't mean you have to turn into a marshmallow.
Yes, but I think it takes a very special person to be able to combine sort of the two worlds. A lot of time there is conflict involved.
Well, I'm not running for office. I'm not a politician. I don't have to gather votes, and I don't have a job. I don't have to worry about being fired.
Yes, certainly, but you do need a certain amount of following and a certain amount of support. I know we all need support.
I think I get it from people like you.
What about people like me?
And people like you.
My thanks to Margaret Atwood. Bodily Harm, our next bestseller. Comes them out one a year.
Oh, no, I'm not that speedy. That's why I'm not Pierre Burton.
Thank God you're not Pierre Burton. Next we're going to meet Letty Pogrebin, who has grown up free and will going to psychoanalyze me as a, what am I?
A nice fellow.
Very nice man. After the break.
No, I want you to be nice to Letty.
This is a local joke which my next guest will not understand, but in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago, they were having one of these, panels, semi-official advertising panels about sex stereotyping on television, including ads and people. And some woman got up from the West Coast and she said to the chairman of the panel, "How can we ever achieve anything against sexual stereotyping as long as you've got people like Gordon Sinclair and Jack Webster on the air. And the chairman most unkindly said, we'll have to wait until they retire or die. I wish I knew who the chairman was. Anyway, I have not read this book. I flipped it open and I thought, here we go again. Dick and Jane in reverse. Answers every question that has or should have occurred to a loving parent. My hero, Phil Donahue. Nice chap. I'm sure he is. I'm glad I'd never met him. Growing Up Free, Raising Your Child for the 80s. Is this entirely on sexual stereotyping by the evil chauvinist system which has up to now existed since time immemorial?
You make it sound like a boring theoretical tract. Actually, it is a set of guidelines of everyday experiences that parents encounter, and it is predicated on the assumption that parents want to raise their children to be their best selves. It's as simple as that.
And it's wrong to raise your child as a best self if it's a little girl by putting it frilly dresses and saying, don't climb that tree. Only little boys climb trees because the branch might break and you could fall and hit yourself.
Well, if you were to ask a loving parent, would you like to raise a child to be half as good as he or she could be, the parent would say no. And yet every day, parents do precisely that in the name of masculinity and femininity. We give our children a half-life. All I'm doing is opening up the other half of the world to both sexes.
Well, I mean, I'm 63, right? I was brought up in the male-female heterosexual business. Never saw or heard of a homosexual, almost said another word, until I suppose I was in the army at 21. It seemed to be a perfectly normal society where the mother, in fact, was the boss. The father supplied the money, the mother ran the household, and your sexual stereotypes were clear-cut and simple, male and female. Was that bad?
Maybe you needed a whole set of rules, or maybe we all thought we did in those days.
But you do. You must discipline the young animal.
Yes, indeed. But not limit them, not stultify them, not censor their development. You and I look as though we're in different generations, but we were probably raised the same way. I was a child in the 40s and a teenager in the 50s, and I very much understand traditional child rearing and its values. I think that my own children are benefiting.
I think you're about 46.
I'm 42.
You don't look it.
That's what non-sexist child rearing does for you. It keeps you young.
Go on.
I think my own children who are teenagers today are benefiting greatly from expanded options. You see, non-sexist child rearing doesn't say a whole set of you musts and you shoulds to replace the old ones. It says you may and you can, and why not try? Now let's get into this business about homosexuality, because you're doing something that I think most parents do, which is to mistake sex role for sexuality. Whether or not a man dries the dishes does not determine who he likes to sleep with. However,
listen, we've been drying dishes in the Webster family since time immemorial.
And you said yourself that you're, quote, normal. I assume you don't think homosexuals are normal, but that's perhaps a larger subject than we have time for.
What's drying dishes got to do with homosexuals?
It's nice that you said that. That's usually what I have to say. Most people feel that the roles that we play in the house determine the sexual outcome, which is why many fathers say to their sons, get out there and play ball with the boys. Don't play the violin, it's a sissy instrument. I don't want you to cross your legs like that, you look like a girl. We're constantly policing the sex role as though our children...
This must be American.
I don't think so. I've been now through Canada a couple of times, and pretty much everything that I say registers.
Give me the silly father who stereotypes his son.
Well, I was interviewed by a little boy in Toronto in a program that I gather is national, called Is Anybody Home? Run by kids. Run by kids.
Heard of it? Jen, never heard of it? Oh, it's in the state corporation.
And it was it was quite a wonderful thing to see that this child understood everything that I'm writing about, because he happened to be raised in a family that had a broad value system. However, I said to him, have you, in your 14 years, ever been called a sissy? And he said, yes. I said, how did it feel? He said, it hurt. I said, did it stop you from doing anything? He said, no, but that's because I knew my parents were behind me. I've seen it stop plenty of my friends from pursuing their true talents, their true interests. So that throughout Growing Up Free, I try to kind of question on the grounds of logic. Does it make sense to treat children different at bedtime? Which people do. Boys and girls are treated differently at bedtime. They are fed differently, toilet trained differently. dressed differently for the outdoors, handled differently, played with differently, and spoken to differently, and described with different adjectives. Then we marvel at vive la différence. We have actually been training them to be central casting types from birth.
Dressed differently. Never put your little girl in a fancy dress. It makes her too feminine.
No, I didn't say that, did
You
I?
almost said it.
No, but color coding at birth.
Pink and blue.
Pink and blue. Why do we do it? Because the first thing we ask each other is, what'd you have? As though we might have had a plant or a chair instead of a child. What we want to know is what it is so we'll know how to treat it. We don't know how to treat it unless it is wearing something to trigger a set of responses, you see. Now, I'm questioning whether that set of responses helps the child or just helps the hang-ups of the parent.
Have you rewritten Dick and Jane?
I'm not interested in role reversal. I'm not interested in...
Dick and Jane.
Yeah, but you said
I
before...
mean, that's what all the feminists were screaming about in this country a few years back. And we used to hire people at $50,000 a year. They never did finish the job to rewrite Dick and Jane. I always thought it was hysterical.
I think you made a mistake, however, in the intro when you said reverse Dick and Jane. That certainly is not our goal, to give men the limitations that women have had or to make women toughen up the way men have had to do. I think we have, as adults, discovered that sex roles are dysfunctional. They don't help us. For you to have to feel brave under every circumstance is not necessarily good for you.
A woman is unfulfilled if by the time she's in the middle 30s she hasn't born a child.
What am I supposed to say to that?
I don't know, say something.
I disagree. I think that a lot of women have been socialized to feel that way. I certainly would hope that they don't feel that way for long, because I think that anyone who has to have a derivative identity is left with nothing when the child or the husband is gone. So I would imagine that if we want to raise healthy daughters, we will not raise them to feel that she's only going to be fulfilled with childbirth. One does it 2 or 3 times in a lifetime,
fulfilling,
you know.
isn't it?
Very. I've done it 3 times. I found it very satisfying.
You've only been married once.
Married once, 18 years, 3 children.
Same husband?
Same husband.
Still married?
For me, it was right. I live a conventional life in an unconventional way.
I'll tell you one thing where I do agree with you. Only just a minute. She lives a conventional life. What does that mean?
It's an aphorism. It helps me through the day. It means that I live with one man. No, I happen to be monogamous. I live with one man. I have children. I am, however, a radical feminist. So it helps people break through the stereotypes they have about ideology and politics to know that I exist. Sometimes.
Where are you from in the States?
New York City.
New York. Okay, let's chat some more with Letty and let's take some phone calls. She's a feminist. Hate her out there, you know. She's the one who wants to make you into a ditch digger and laborer, just like in the Soviet Union. After the break. My wife exploded the other night when she watched a television commercial, and she's old and she's younger than I am. Jesus, that was terrible. Anyway, we're watching this commercial, and it's this half-naked couple, handsome, effeminate-looking guy, and a gorgeous-looking woman, and they're naked, and she's rubbing his body with lotion and saying, "Oh, it makes us smell so good, and the skin that's so nice to touch." Why don't you campaign against those kind of repulsive ads?
Well, I do. Why don't you? I'm very much an activist. In fact, one of the things I counsel in Growing Up Free is to sit in the room with your child when he or she is watching television. Do you know children see 350,000 commercials before they graduate from high school, 18,000 murders usually in the service of, quote, manhood, and yet parents walk out of the room and let the electronic babysitter have at their kids. I raised an activist kid as well. One of my daughters, when she was 8 years old, objected to a Wheaties commercial that showed all kinds of boys doing active, kind of fun things like climbing trees and playing sports. And my daughter wrote, and it's in Growing Up Free in her handwriting, she said, "Dear Wheaties, I am not going to eat one more tasty morsel of your cereal until you put some girls on your ads. In fact, I'm going to girl-cot you," which is her way of boycotting a product. And she indeed stopped. We all stopped buying Wheaties. And about 1.5 years later, she came running into us and said, "I did it. I got them to change their ad because indeed their ads now showed men and women and boys and girls engaged in active play." Now I think when you are a non-sexist parent willing to engage the system, willing to kind of express an opinion in a strong way. You teach a child critical judgment. You teach a child that one can have impact on the environment.
You know, your end object is not to make us all into a world of neuters, is it?
No.
Indistinguishable neuters.
As a matter of fact, that is one of the most common misapprehensions about non-sexist child rearing, the whole notion of unisex.
Yeah.
If you think of it logically, I am not interested in decreasing diversity. I'm interested in increasing it. In fact, I don't even like only two types of human beings, the male type and the female type. I'd like to get rid of typing, and I'd like to find the individual child within each human being. I'd like to nourish that uniqueness, not unisex, not supersex, not macho and little lady, but whoever the person is.
Surely that's the normal aim and object of every intelligent person meeting with another human being on the face of this earth.
One would think
If
so.
they like them, they want to get to know them.
Except that for Growing Up Free, which is 641 pages long, I did not rely on my own experience or that of my friends. I did 8 years of research to determine what it is that we do unconsciously to differentiate our children without regard for their uniqueness. And as I began to show you, we do it from the moment that they're born, whether it's the color coding or the different
Or
attitudes.
buying a doll for a little girl and a train set for a boy?
What are we
Is that
buying?
wrong?
Oh, yes. If
Why
it's
is-
only what we're buying.
Why is that wrong?
If a parent watching
You're not going to tell me
stands
that
in the
a
doorway...
girl child has some maternal instinct which does take her at least towards dolls?
If you know that every average little 9-year-old girl has 24 dolls, 24 dolls by the time she's 9, that's no instinct, that's brainwashing. She's had a doll put in her lap from the time she could sit herself. I ask parents, stand in the doorway of your
What did you get, a little
child's...
machine gun?
Stand in the doorway of your child's room.
Little hammer?
Assuming it's a 6 or 7-year-old
A
girl.
football?
I'm about to tell you. You stand in that doorway and you say, could I move a 6 or 7-year-old boy into my daughter's room right now without changing a thing? That room is probably suffering from terminal feminine fluff. It's probably all pink. It's probably all nurturant toys. You couldn't move a boy in there.
What kind of toys?
Nurturant. Toys
What's a nurturant toy?
Toys that teach motherhood, teach
With
mothering
little
skills.
dollies?
Little dollies, little tea sets, little irons, little stoves,
Little
and so
dolls'
on.
houses?
You wouldn't move a boy into such a room. You'd feel it was he would be ill-prepared for life. Well, so is she. And all I say is don't take the dolls away. Add what you would have to add for a little boy.
Give them what they want.
Exactly. But when parents look
If
at a
you can
child's
afford
room,
it.
they say, well, this is what she likes, you know. She doesn't like trucks. Well, you've never given her one. You've never given her a set of blocks. You've never given her a chemistry set. And then you marvel at the fact that when she's 9 or 10, she's scared to death to express a nonconformist interest when
I
you
think
say,
you're
what do you
trying to
want?
reform a world that was reformed 40 years ago, as far as that was concerned.
I wish you were right. A recent study done in North Carolina of many households with children under the age of 6 found sex stereotype toy collections up and down the line, not one exception. You can't tell me that not one little girl in North Carolina wanted to play with blocks.
Well, of course they've got to get blocks, but I'm not sure that sex stereotyping is all bad.
I am sure. I spent 8 years looking at the sexual
Bad to give a little girl a
socialization.
doll. That's evil.
I said you add what's missing, not take away what the child has. You have dolls and trucks.
My
You
dear
have
friend.
active play and you have quiet play. You have adventure stories and you have poetry. You don't divide all of experience in half and then say that we're raising human beings to be their
In fact,
best selves.
all they have is television. In fact,
Well,
because
they have a lot
with,
of
With the
television.
non-sexual stereotyping
They have
and,
schools.
and equality and all the rest of it, mother and father are never home. The poor little darlings are brought up in daycare centres because mother's out doing a thing, or even the father is doing the odd housekeeping bit. There's no family unit anymore, partly because of people like you and like me.
You tend to paint pictures with a rather broad brush.
Yes, I
Have you
do.
noticed? I am certainly not interested
you
in
want
everybody putting
Woman
their-
must have equality. She must have equal training, equal this, equal that, so she can go out and be the president of Pepsi-Cola and beat her kids, or put them in daycare centers.
I don't think that I or Margaret Atwood, who was preceding me here, want to be the president of Pepsi-Cola, but there are women out there who probably can do a better job of it than some of the upper management people that we see running the corporations of both of our countries. And for that matter, the governments. I think if anything, our governments suffer from a kind of masculinist bias.
Whose
Talk
fault
about
is
fear
that?
of feminism.
Whose fault is that?
It's the fault of socialization from birth, where little boys have been taught masculinity and violence are one and the same.
And women are taught not to run for politics, not to take the part in public life.
More importantly, there's a deeper, more profound value system associated and linked with each gender. And with the male gender, warlike proclivities are assumed to prove manhood. Now then...
Is it not a fact that little boys are basically more violent than little girls?
No, it is not.
Look at the number of murders carried out. Men by, 10,001 carry out more killings than women.
But you can't look at a final statistic and say that that proves an instinct. That proves the result of a culture that has been, in fact, molding us.
We want women to be as violent as men.
I certainly don't. I'd like to relieve men of the compulsion to prove their masculinity through violence, through false bravado, through a kind of fiction that they know everything. We women have to lie about our intellect in order to...
Hold your breath, hold your breath.
All right.
Just for a minute.
You kind of rev me up a bit.
What I'm going to do, no remarks on that on the program. Hold your breath a minute. I'm going to bring in this woman who advocates living in sin. This is my sense of humor. Lynn Fels. I'm going to interview her, move it, and then I'm going to keep you here and we'll take calls to both of you.
Fine.
That's good. Margaret, that wasn't the outfit you wore here the last time.
No problem, Margaret.
We'll just bury this.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
2 11-minute segments, Jack. I want you to do all the talking in this segment. You hear me?
All right.
Yeah, I was considerably upset by my wife's operation. It's just shaking me quite a bit.
I'm sure. But as I say, the most... No, that...
Lynn Fels has written a book called Living Together, which is a serious book with a lot of good advice in it. It's about unmarried couples in Canada. Not to be flip, as I sometimes am, but not to be flip, as I sometimes am. Is marriage now out of bleeding style?
No, it isn't. Don't you remember all the hoopla with Prince Charles and Princess Diana? I went to 7 weddings this summer.
Because of Charles and Di?
Yeah, so I think marriage and weddings are very in still. Marriage is deeply entrenched in our society, and it's not going to go away.
Non-sex stereotype marriage is deeply entrenched in our society because the living together syndrome completely cuts at normal marriage legal ties, does it not?
Yes, it does.
Now, what's the score on an unmarried couple living together? Can you cheat the tax department better if you're married or if you're living common law?
It used to be better if you were living common law. Now, when you're married, the tax laws are much better for married couples. For example, in the income tax, you can deduct your spouse, the person you're married to, as a dependent. But you cannot do that if you're living together. And just last year, that tax law, was ruled discriminatory to couples who live together. You know, couples have a lot...
It was ruled discriminatory by whom?
By the Human Rights Commission, a board.
Not by the finance minister for the nation of Canada.
That's right, and the income tax law has preference over the Human Rights Commission.
Well, you can understand it's going to be a long while before that's changed because every couple who chose to live together or say they were living together would rob the Finance Department of Canada of many billions of dollars.
At the same time, you have a lot of couples who are living together, who have children. One person is working and the other is taking care of the children, and that person has to undertake the financial responsibility of both the person he's living with and the children and has no tax relief.
Well, there's one simple answer to that, isn't there?
Treat both married and couples living together equally.
Or to get married.
Well, that's one argument, but not everybody wants to get married.
What can you tell me, and this is something in which I lack knowledge at the moment, what can you tell me about the property division of a common law couple? Now, as far as a married couple is concerned in British Columbia, the judge always has total discretion, of course, but if it's a reasonable marriage of a reasonable length of time with perhaps one child or even no children, it goes 50-50, doesn't it?
Right.
50-50.
That's right.
What about common laws?
It's not 50-50. That's the one thing that upset me when I was doing my research is couples would say to me, I know what my legal rights are. If you live together in BC 2 years, then the law considers you legally married. You have the same legal rights as married couples. This is not true. When you're married, it's 50-50 split with property.
You shattered me when you told me
together.
that this morning.
I know. So many couples believe that they have the same property rights. But if you've lived together with a man for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and you've brought up his children, you've stayed at home, and he's bought the furniture, the car, the house, if he decides to throw you out, you're out of the house, you're out of the furniture, you're out of the car, and you have no rights.
Now, you've researched this recently.
That's right. In no province in Canada do you have property rights. What you buy is what you own.
In other words, I remember one particular case, though, which must have been ruled out, whereby the guy moved out one day before the 2 years, or maybe it was to do with something else. But you're telling me right now that if I live common law, you live common law with Joe Blow for 10 years in BC, or is it all across the country?
Right across the country.
You have no automatic claim on property rights.
That's right. The only claim you have is if you put down money to buy it.
In other words, I've got to show that I worked as a skivvy for so much or whatever and put in my down payment, and therefore I want back half of that house.
That's right. I came across a couple just last week, actually. They'd lived together for 17 years. 10 years ago, she put $12,000 down to buy their house together. Last week, he turned around and said to her, I'll give you $12,000 to get out of this house, to get out of this relationship. The woman did not write down her rights in a contract. Her only recourse is to go to the courts. Now, she put money in, so she has a claim on that house, but it's not automatically 50-50, and she's going to have to go to the courts. That's going to cost money, cost time, and cause a lot of pain.
Lynn Fels of living together. Oh, you're married?
Yes, I am.
Once?
Once. I've been married 4 years, but we lived together for 1.5 years before I got married.
You lived in sin for 18 months.
And had a hell of a good time.
Before it was blessed by the church.
That's not quite the way I would look at
No,
it.
you know I'm only pulling your leg. Or am I? I'm not sure.
Some people would agree with that.
No, I'm only pulling your leg, really. Even I have got to accept change from time to time. You mentioned contract. All right. She's a social worker, overpaid and underworked, and he's a teacher, overpaid and underworked. In BC we're talking about.
Okay.
And they've decided to live together. Do they have to go to a lawyer?
They don't have to. You can sit down and write a contract on the back of an envelope if you want to. It's a good idea if you have a lot of property, if you own a house, to sit down with a lawyer to make sure that it's drawn up properly. Because it's an awful thing, but couples who love each other so much when they move in together seem to hate each other an awful lot when they break up. And they don't share a thing.
Just like marriage.
You know?
And you've got to say down, that's my old desk that belongs to me, and these spittoons belong to him, and do that then.
There's one couple I interviewed. They had lived together for 3 years, and they were quite happy, but they never kept track of who bought what, and it was quite complicated. They broke up. He refused to give her anything, wouldn't give her the records, the plant, nothing. And so one night, he was taking a shower, and she went into the apartment with her mother and 2 girlfriends, and they grabbed everything they could while he ran around the apartment in his towel, yelling and screaming. I mean, a terrible way to end a relationship.
Happens all the time.
I guess so. That's the tragedy.
Yeah, she goes to work in the morning and he moves in the furniture van and disappears to Europe with the kids in the afternoon. I'm very difficult to get. Now,
I'll tell you one thing that bothers me about British Columbia. Children born outside of marriage are illegitimate. In this country, only in Quebec, Ontario, and New Brunswick are children born outside of marriage considered legitimate. So the sins of the father and the mother are still put down onto the kid.
Doesn't show on the birth certificate.
Pardon?
It doesn't show on the birth certificate.
No, they're still legally considered illegitimate, and therefore they have different inheritance rights than children born in marriage.
Didn't know that either.
The father...
Where are you from? Toronto?
That's right.
You've done your homework.
You buddy... I did, yes.
What did you say?
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize.
Family show.
I said it on the air anyway myself this morning. One question I'm only asking because she's here.
Okay.
Letty Pogrebin. You've met, have you?
Yes, we have.
Okay. What about if 2 gays attempt? No, I don't like it. 2 homosexuals marry. I hate that word, gay. Do homosexuals marry? Should they have legal rights? Do you discuss and advocate this at all?
I do discuss it in my book, and in Canada, homosexual couples have no legal rights whatsoever.
In
No
that
rights.
so-called form of marriage?
There's no such thing as a marriage between
Because
homosexuals.
it's obviously against public policy, isn't it?
That's right.
It seems so.
And in the States?
The same.
And in your view, it's against public policy?
I'm not in favor of it being against public policy, but it is, in fact, against public policy.
I think couples who live together should have the right to write down a contract, what their legal
Oh, yeah,
rights are.
two men living together or two, whatever living together can write down a thing, but we don't want it recognized in law, do we?
I think we should.
Oh.
I think couples should have legal recourse.
This
Right
is right.
now, if you're
It
living
is
together...
any civil contract. I'm just saying, don't recognize the marriage of homosexuals, that's all I'm saying.
Don't call it a marriage if it bothers you, but allow them to form an allegiance that makes sense for them and that works economically to their advantage.
They can sign a civil contract anytime they want to.
Can they?
Well, it doesn't mean that it'll be recognized in the court. The judge may say, this is a contract between two men who are living together, and public policy says that homosexuality is not accepted. We don't have any law that says, in Ontario, we don't have any law that says
I'll bet you're wrong.
homosexuality. No,
I'll bet you're
sexual
wrong.
discrimination against...
A normal
it's
civil
not
contract.
passed.
Now, okay, enough of that. What do I know about it? I have with me now two feminists. You're a feminist. Lynn Fels is living together, and the inimitable Letty Pogrebin, maiden name Cotton. Maiden name? Original name Cotton. C-O-T-T-I-N. Have at either one or both after the break, please. Okay, when you grow up free, you don't get married, you live together. Letty Pogrebin and Lynn Fels. And I'm not saying a word from here on in, providing the calls are on the point. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Lady on your right regarding femininity and leveling out between boys and girls. Now, when a baby is born, you have to toilet train a little girl differently to you toilet train a little boy. If you didn't do that, there'd be disasters. You know, the boys stand up and the girls sit down. The other thing is, we can't
Just a minute,
change
just a minute. You mentioned different types of toilet training.
Yes, but I certainly didn't mean accommodating oneself to biological facts. Anyone who didn't do that has to be a little loony.
Yeah.
What I mean is that we toilet train them at different times. We toilet train little girls sooner with the expectation that they must be tidy. We give boys another 6 months before we get tough on them in terms of toilet training on the average.
That's a personal opinion. I'm a mother too.
No, mine isn't a personal. Mine isn't a personal opinion.
There's a very vast difference between the structure of the human body, between them.
She's not arguing that.
Boy,
Of course.
These things have to be taken into account. For instance, a little
Okay, we accepted biological difference. She's merely saying that the
So a
female
little
is
girl
expected
shouldn't
to be
play
tidy or
football
sooner.
and get hit in the chest, for example, which is a very delicate area which a boy doesn't have. It doesn't matter with little boys if they get hit in the chest.
It does matter if little
because
boys
the bodies
get hit.
are so different.
Just a
It
minute.
does
And for a little girl and dolls,
Oh.
when you take a little girl shopping and you're getting something for Christmas, usually it's she that goes for the pretty doll.
Okay, 2 points.
2 points.
Football
Well,
for little
first
girls
one-
and little girls going naturally towards little dolls.
Right, well, the first one is so obvious. Everyone in the studio is giggling. I mean, if we were really concerned about the vulnerability of the physique, we would not let little boys whose genitals are on the outside of their bodies play football. We make accommodations because we want little boys to grow up learning how to play football, and so we have something called an athletic cup.
Jockstrap.
The same can be done. Protection can be devised and has been devised so that little girls can safely play active and contact sports. As for children naturally gravitating towards dolls, I think that one cannot say anybody does anything naturally after one has been alive for 3 years. One is the result of one's upbringing.
Hey, where am I going now? Hold on, please. Go ahead, please.
Yes, with regards to raising children, I was raised to believe that if I didn't have a child before I was 30 years old, that I would be unfulfilled as a woman. And, you know, I had to do that. I had to have a baby before I was 30, so I had a baby. And it didn't offer instant fulfillment. I discovered that, you know, and my child's only a month old. And I think that'll help in how I raise my child, who happens to be a little girl. I'll let her know what options she has open to her. But I think you have to treat little girls as little girls and little boys as little boys in some instances. I like having doors open for me and, you know, some of those aspects of being feminine, but by the same token, I don't like people who tell me I have to stay put as a secretary because
Okay, you're converted, you're converted.
Yes, well, obviously, if you have to pay for the doors to be open for you by being forced to remain a secretary for your whole life, you might reconsider. However, one would hope that we open doors for one another and we retain basic courtesies without having to lose.
Let me tell you, Letty Pogrebin, I'm one of the greatest door-opening holders in the world, and not once in 100 times does a woman of any age turn around and hold the door open.
No, you're looking at one that does it all the time. So there.
You're 1 in 100. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, I have a question for both of your...
Okay, common law and growing up free, right?
Yes, both of them. And what I'd like to say is, I happen to be 48 years old. I've had 7 broken noses. At the age of 9 years old, my parents forced me to take violin lessons, which I took to the age of 16. I sat in with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra under Sir Ernest Macmillan, played the violin, then went out and played professional hockey and played semi-professional.
So what's the point? What's the point?
The point is, I don't think that a parent can force you to be what you're going to be. I think what you're going to be is what you're going to be. If you want to go to the right or go to the left, you're born with certain senses. You have a right to make up your own mind. I mean, at the age of 5 years old, the little girl across the road, we'd go underneath the porch and look at each other, you know, and we found out the difference between Catholics and Protestants even at that young age. But, you know, you grow up
This
to be...
boy's been around, hasn't he? Broken nose and all.
The other woman there, I think that living together, I don't say it's a sin. I was married for years and years and years, and I got a divorce out of Toronto. I moved out here to the coast. I met a woman. We lived together a couple of years. She got a divorce, I got a divorce, and we got married. It was simple as that.
So what's your point?
Well, the point is, I don't think it's immoral to live together, but I think if people do it for the right reasons, like until you can get a divorce, I say go ahead.
Okay. He didn't add much to us, did he?
Well, I think it's really important that if you decide to live together, you sit down and discuss why you're living together. Some couples shouldn't live together, they're not mature enough, or they're living together for the wrong reasons. Others are mature and they're committed to the relationship, and living together is a good option.
I think half the time they live together now so they can afford a ski chalet.
Can afford the mortgage is more likely.
Or a ski chalet. Go ahead, please.
You're looking at number 2 in 100 that will open the door for a man if he needs it.
Well, certainly pleased to meet you. I've never seen you on the street anywhere.
Well, if you got your arms full, you'll find me. Anyways, I agree with what Lynn's been saying about trying to raise children as children, not as a boy, not as a girl. And right now we're having a bit of a fight with the local hockey association over this, that even though it's against the Human Rights Code, wants to discriminate against girls. Now, my son plays hockey. He figure skates, which is sometimes considered a girl's sport, not a boy's sport. And there's no hassles about that. My daughter figure skates. She wants to play hockey. We have to take her way out into another municipality so she can, at the moment, play hockey. They're accommodating her.
This is surely a routine problem which they eventually take to court and win, isn't it?
One would hope, yes. Up until now, families have been very successful in advancing the cause of their daughters, but it is a little unfortunate that we have to fight our way to play. In the chapter in Growing Up Free called On Sports, I try to give parents the strength to fight the system, because very often, for instance, in the Little League in the United States, I don't know if you have something similar, it was a many-year battle to give little girls the right to go out there and play ball. I think that for parents who are willing to get into the fray, they will find that the rewards are immense. It has been discovered that what children gain from sports is not just the kind of classic notion of sportsmanship, but also leadership training, the proper balance between competition and cooperation, And in fact, no woman who is very successful in the business world has been found to not have some sort of sportsy background.
Did you see how she nearly choked on that word? Sports. Man, ship. And you can't say sports person ship.
No, and I don't want to. I just was baiting you.
You were not.
A little bit.
No, you weren't. You were serious. Go ahead, please. Hello there.
Hello.
That's you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think...
Well, come on. What happened to him?
He forgot what he was going to say.
Yeah.
Men sometimes, you know. Sorry.
Don't alienate the host.
Be very careful. We'll take only men calls from now on. You see, we can discriminate too very easily. Go ahead from Vernon, BC.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning, sir.
I would like to address the lady that's got the long hair there with the glasses that said that the boys should be...
Yeah, the 42-year-old with the long hair and the glasses. Her name is Letty Pogrebin.
Oh.
Growing up free.
All right.
With long hair and glasses.
To address her, does she not think that it is chivalrous in our old times? Like, I'm 47 myself, and I raised 3 girls...
Never mind your history. What's your question?
Okay, but I'd like to know, doesn't she think that men can make just as good husbands if they cook? The best chefs in the world are cooks.
A man.
Of course, of course I think that. I think that whatever strengths one brings into a marriage, and if cooking is one of them, should be shared, should be exploited, should be utilized. The sad thing is when a man enjoys cooking and feels somehow that he doesn't want to be caught dead in the kitchen, or worse than that, feels that he has to hide that from his children because he won't provide a role model. That's wrong. That's just plain wrong.
He has to hide that from his children because he won't provide a role
model for
a man. I wish
he
spoke English. I really do.
That's so clear.
Role
really,
model.
Chad. A role model. In other words, a model of what your role is supposed to be in life. And a lot of men censor themselves for fear that they are not conforming to the classic role of a male. Now, if you want to raise multi-competent children, and in this complex world, who doesn't? You have to be able to say, I can cook, I can fix, I can comfort somebody, and I also can lead. We as human beings have so much to offer, and to squelch one part of ourselves, or to squelch that which our child sees in
Have
the
you ever
home.
cleaned out a toilet drain?
Yes,
You have?
Mm-hmm.
I was never suppressed cooking in the kitchen, and I was never called a sissy for doing so.
That's good. Some people have been, however.
And
Not
I
me.
figure that the way it works...
I'm an excellent cook. I make the best bacon and eggs in North America. Go ahead, please. And that's not a traditional one, is it?
No.
Bacon and eggs?
No, usually the manly thing is only to stand outside over the fire with the big hat on. That's when men feel comfortable.
Putting a big hat on is just so stupid. It doesn't happen anymore. I mean, don't be silly. Except in the States, of course, where you really are very...
Outdoor barbecue-ish, right.
70-year-old president frightens us all to death, doesn't he? Go ahead, please. Well, that's the wrong one. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Lynn, I was wanting to know if you're aware that it's considerably cheaper to live common law than it is to be married in Canada and BC anyways. If you have children, if you're a single parent with a child, you get a great tax relief.
That's right. That is one advantage of living
Explain
together.
that to me. I don't understand it.
Well, earlier on the show, Lynn said, you asked Lynn if it was cheaper to be married for a couple in BC or to live common law with the taxes. And if you live common law and you have a child, say 2 single parents get together and live common law, it is much greater tax relief for them because they can declare their first child equal to a spouse. So they get a great tax savings. You can save $200 a month on your taxes. Whereas you get married, you don't have that money.
Is she right?
Yes, she is right.
My thanks to you, Lynn Fels, of living together. And my thanks to the cheeky one. And I won't hold open any damn doors for you. Growing up free. Letty Pogrebin. I'll be back after the break. Nothing. Quite honestly, don't know who's going to be on tomorrow, but whoever it is, male or female, I'm certainly not going to hold open the door for them if the occasion arises. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely. just for fun. Watch Webster, 9 a.m. precisely.